This time on Red, White, and Burnouts.
Here at the tuning school, we are providers of high-performance tuning knowledge.
There's kind of a process that's been laid out for how we do this. Now, the beauty is we typically buy our own cars for this type of development.
Okay, so our Corvette is one of the most important vehicles we have, and the reason being is it's extremely flexible. I was driving the Corvette last October at Sebring, and I think it came around turn 14. The car just shut down, just out of left field. I mean, it made a little bit of a clatter, and then just poof, it was over. And I couldn't believe it. I figured, hey, you know, if the car is going to go, it's going to explode in some violent, awesome manner, but instead, just shut down.
The engine just shut off. As weird as that sounds, it just was on 1 second and off the next.
Let's get it started.
My name is Bob Moriali. I am the president of the tuning school, and here at the tuning school we are providers of high-performance tuning knowledge. That means that our job is to do research and development every day so that we can save you guys, the shop owners and the other educators around the world, the time and the energy and the effort required to figure out how to properly tune high-performance vehicles. So we cover vehicles that are GM, Ford, Dodge, and then all over the spectrum from there. I was a computer nerd a long time ago. Back in second grade, I started doing my first programming. And then as I kind of got older, I realized that cars were really cool. And then cars obviously started coming with computers. And I really enjoy going fast, and I enjoy computers. And I realized that there must be a way to kind of bridge the gap. Because with our first computer-controlled car, which was the '87 Buick Grand National, we threw all the parts at it we could, and we still weren't going very fast. And we realized that there was a missing link somewhere in here, which turned out to be the computer. And so through a bunch of reverse engineering and research time, we were able to start programming in hex and understanding what tables were, what parameters meant, and kind of just beginning in the early ages of the tuning industry. That's just how we did things and how we figured it out. So we would make one change, test it, and see how the car responded, and we were just overjoyed if we were able to figure out where Spark Advance was. But it's come a long way now, and through partnering with other companies, we're able to work very efficiently, whereas now we don't have to do the research and development to figure out where all those parameters are in an ECM. And so at the tuning school, our job is really to figure out kind of how to properly tune and to teach a process that works well. So if you do bolt-ons, heads cam, or forced induction, we can walk you through a process, and we can provide you support for a year, which comes with all of our Learn at Home, online, and live seminar courses. So that way when you go back home and you get stuck in the middle of tuning and you have a problem, that's okay, we're here for you. So back in the beginning, before the tuning school even officially existed, we were doing tuning all the way back through the mid-90s, but we had a high-performance parts installation company, if you will, so basically a performance shop. And through that performance shop, we always got these requests from all over the country where people would say, hey, we really would like to know how to tune. And so we decided to go ahead and partner. At that time, we partnered with HP Tuners, and we created our first Learn at Home course. And by creating that Learn at Home course, it actually became the single biggest line item seller in our performance parts company. And so we realized that we had literally one line item that was outselling everything else by a huge factor, and it started to consume more of our time. And so we wanted to do right by our customers, and we wanted to grow that properly, so we said we needed to go ahead and brand this. And so we said, hey, what should we call it? And it pretty much came up with the tuning school. It was a basic, simple name, and the concept worked well. And then we eventually sold that performance company so we could focus strictly on the tuning school. At the time, we had just gone through a really difficult time as a company, where we experienced some issues with some employees and some theft that was going on, and we basically cleared the table and started over. And at that point, I just started praying, and I said, all right, God, I'm doing it wrong. Can you please provide the right people, because clearly I can't get this right. And so we went about a year without any added new employees, and the workload was heavy, and we were trying real hard. And then, through a mutual friend of ours, actually through my Bible study, he said, hey, do you know Brett McClelland? And I said, no, I don't know him. And he said, well, he's 17, I think turning 18 soon, and he loves everything car related. He's really, really good, and he's got a good personality, and he's a hard worker. He said, would you be interested in hiring him? And I said, no. And so I said no, and I went home that night, and I thought about it and prayed about it, and then God laid it on my heart, hey, you need to bring him in and interview him. And so I thought, okay, fine. So I'll bring him in and interview him. And Brett came in, and he interviewed better than like 90% of the adults that we've ever interviewed. And the best thing that he said, and I can remember it clearly, we asked him, what would you do if someone called and asked you a question that you didn't have the answer to? And he thought for like 3/10 of a second. He goes, I don't know, I just tell him I don't know, and I'll help you by finding someone that does. And I'm like, that's right there. That's the honesty that we need. That's the heart that we need, because that will get the right answer to the customer.
When I got hired, I was 17, almost 18, and I really was just looking for a job. And I had a mutual friend of mine that happened to know Bob. And when he talked to me about it, he's like, hey, I have no idea what Bob does, but every time he talks about it, it sounds really cool. So it might be somebody you're interested in working in, because he kind of knew I had a passion for cars. And I came in and I interviewed, and everything here was just amazing. It was ridiculous. And actually, when I came in to interview, I didn't even know tuning cars was a thing. Like, I didn't even know that was possible. So it was a whole new world to me when I walked into the door, and I had my interview, and I felt like it went pretty well. And then later that night, Bob called me, and he's like, hey, do you want to come help me dyno tune this 700 horsepower GTO tomorrow? And of course I said yes. So it was kind of all downhill from there. They brought me on board, and I started doing some simple stuff like cleaning, sweeping the floors, little projects around the shop. From there, they just started getting me more involved every single day. So I started to sit into some classes, which led to me assisting to some classes, which led to me teaching some classes, which has led to me doing R&D. So it's kind of been a crazy road over the last 4 years that started with really humble beginnings.
So then Brett came along. He's like a sponge. He's starting to learn up. We're giving him a little more responsibility, a little more responsibility. And the next thing you know, I think it's been like 4 years, and now Brett is doing an awesome job, and he's a huge asset for the tuning school. And I just love working with Brett, because we have a great time together. We really do. We actually are some of the few people on earth that get to go to work, do what we love every day, and just have a blast doing it. Okay, so how we do our research and development is, the best way I can describe it to people is it's kind of like trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but without knowing what it's supposed to look like. So you know that you have a vehicle that works well, and it's obviously a fairly new vehicle, and people haven't really tuned it before. And we do stock pulls, and we record some stock data, and we start looking at the ECM as a whole, and we say, is this ECM airflow based? Is it torque based? Or how is the ECM thinking? And so our goal up front is just to get a big picture of what's going on. And then we start making changes one at a time, and we will actually record, test one change at a time, and see the outcome of how the vehicle behaves. And through the scanner, we're able to deduct kind of what the parameter has an impact on. And so we start putting together all these little pieces. And as a short example, we developed the 6-speed auto transmission course back in like 2007 or 8. And that course took 1 year just to teach how to tune 6-speed automatics. And it's because it took one change, one day, and a full test over and over and over again. But as a result of that type of process and how we do it, we trust the processes, because they take a long time and they shake out and they build well. And when we're done, meaning the guys who are doing the actual technical R&D, we pass them through other people who aren't all that technical so that they can review them. And then as they review them and actually try and tune with them themselves, we know that we've developed a process that is repeatable, accurate, people can learn with, and actually go and make money with.
So by the time I've made it to the R&D portion of my job, there's many people that have gone before me and already done this. So there's kind of a process that's been laid out for how we do this. And essentially it boils down to there's fuel, there's air, and there's spark. And we got to figure out what tables control those things on the car. And then we have to also figure out some basic information on what type of computer it is. Is it a fuel-based computer, a torque-based computer, airflow-based? What is it looking for to make its calculations? And that takes a little bit of legwork on our end. But thankfully there was good processes set up for me when I came into it. So it's essentially a lot of just, answering a bunch of questions and then taking those questions and making them into written course material. Now the beauty is we typically buy our own cars for this type of development, which is awesome because it gives us unlimited time and access to certain vehicles. So I can sit on a dyno for 2 weeks at a time trying to figure out one problem. It's a lot easier than taking somebody else's car and borrowing it for a certain period of time and giving it back to them. So the company learned a long time ago that if we just bought the cars that we're going to do research or development on and then eventually do classes on, it just works out a lot better for us in the long run.
We're in this for the long haul. Long term, we need to be doing this professionally and actually have our own vehicles. And so this way, if we have a problem, it's fine. And we can take care of it, we can upgrade it and whatnot. So by doing our own vehicles, we do have some upfront costs in that, but it's better for not just us, but for our students. Because then our students can come in and we can teach them and they can actually get a real experience, and we don't have to worry about the vehicle, you know, and if it has a problem, we can upgrade it. And actually that's a great way that students end up learning, and we put parts on from partners that we trust, and in the end the students get to learn on real world vehicles with real world parts on them. So when we go to purchase a new vehicle for the tuning school, we normally start by looking at, like, you know, Auto Trader, Car Gurus, things like that. Even Craigslist sometime. I think Brett came in and said, hey, you should buy this. My buddy saw this really cool Mustang and it's local, so we went and picked it out. But what we do is we start by processing and finding a vehicle that's relevant and that can be used for a long period of time. So we're not going to buy something that's 20 years old, we're going to buy something that's fairly new that we actually think has some legs and some length to it, so that when the classes come in, they'll go, yeah, this is relevant, I can go home, I've learned on it, and I can tune and make some money with it.
So at the time, me and Bob kind of had a come to Jesus meeting. We sat down and we looked at what our current class car was, which was a STS turbocharged 98 Pontiac Trans Am. And the car was awesome and we loved the car, and it ran like 10s in the quarter mile. It was a blast. But unfortunately, it was kind of getting dated, and you could kind of tell a lot of guys in the industry were starting to move away from doing those older style cars. So we knew it was time for like a refresh, time to do something a little bit newer. And so we went from focusing on the Gen 3 stuff to focusing on a Gen 4. And so we eventually landed on the C6, and it just seemed right. You know, and Bob did some shopping, eventually found the car we ended up with. It actually ended up kind of being the perfect car, because while it is a Gen 4 and an E38, it's kind of the transfer year for GM. So it's got some really weird, quirky things that you wouldn't normally find on anything else, but that's really helped us actually develop some really good course material. And it's a really good teaching tool during classes, because we can show students these weird things on these early Gen 4 vehicles.
All right, so our Corvette, I actually really love our Corvette, and it actually came to be through the Corvette forum. I found it up for sale there, and the reason we ended up with it is because it was one of like 5 across the country that was fairly well priced, but it was not modified. And for what we're looking for, we like to see things that aren't heavily modified yet, because that allows us generally to start with a blank sheet.
So the Corvette is amazing for having during these classes, because it's a great learning tool for most guys. It's very middle of the road for what they're going to be learning on. And then the other beauty is about the time when we got this Corvette, HP Tuners actually released what's called a virtual VE calculator, emulator. And that was actually something we got to test on this Corvette. So everything kind of fell perfect into place for us to do some really important research and development on the car, as well as it's a super well-rounded car for the classes. The idea is we're going to build it up to a point where it can be used from anywhere from a beginner's car, naturally aspirated, to an advanced car running 15 pounds of boost for an advanced class.
Okay, so our Corvette is one of the most important vehicles we have, and the reason being is it's extremely flexible. So we teach a beginner's GM HP Tuners class with the same Corvette we use for the GM advanced classes. All right, so we do like to test our processes here, not just in the dyno, but in the real world. And so we get 2 benefits by that. Number 1, we have a blast by driving our cars on the road course. Number 2, it's the most abusive, torturous thing you can do to a car. So I was driving a Corvette last October at Sebring International Raceway, and having a great time at the end of day 2, one of the last sessions, and the car had been running flawlessly, no problems. In fact, there was 2 of us abusing the car throughout the weekend, so it was doing great like it always does. And I think it came around turn 14.
Hey Bob, that looked like a really good lap, but I haven't seen you come around yet. Like, what's going on? You're way off your pace. What's happening?
Bad news. Good news is didn't wreck. Bad news is the car's dead.
What do you mean the car's dead? What is that? What are you talking about?
I think I'm on 14, and I don't know, it's like 6,000 RPM. It just seems it just stopped.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah.
The car just shut down, just out of left field. I mean, it made a little bit of a clatter, and then just poof, it was over.
So inevitably, the LS2 that was in the car failed us, so it was kind of just our time. Reality was the engine had about 100,000 miles on it, so it inevitably failed, and it actually failed on one of the last corners of the racetrack.
Okay, well, so you're gonna, can you get the car back here?
No, it won't start, it won't move. I'm off by the corner workers, so I'm safe, but they're gonna have to send a like tow truck, like a wrecker, to come tow me back.
Oh, man, all right, that sounds good. I'll see you when you get back here.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. I figured, hey, you know, if the car is gonna go, it's gonna explode in some violent, awesome manner, but instead, just shut down.
The way that Bob tells it, the engine just shut off. As weird as that sounds, it just was on 1 second and off the next.
The valves tell the story probably better than me, but that's actually how the Corvette's original LS2 finished out its life.
That was the end of life for our poor little LS2.
Next time on Red, White, and Burnouts.
So the technical reason for why the timing chain actually broke was our fault. It wasn't really the car's fault.
So after the engine blew up and we kind of analyzed it and figured out, we pretty much had to start from scratch again. We sat down and tried to figure out what we wanted to build.
So we kind of looked at this as our opportunity to turn the car into really what we wanted and what we could make it the best that we could be at this point.
You know, obviously our plans are huge, and then we have these time constraints, so we kind of narrow them down a little bit. And then we realized we had budgetary constraints, of course, like anybody.
We had classes that were coming up that were relatively close, about 2 months away from the time the car broke. So we had to not only create a plan and then start to execute the plan and make sure the plan happened all within 2 months. So it was a very short time frame. So both money and time were a huge concern on us, and they were not in our favor.